Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Chainsaw Man Season 1, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So immediately picking up after last episode, and Denji obviously is super into Makima, and it makes a lot of sense. She's like the first person that's not only nice to him, and he thinks she's hot, so it's kind of like a lot of simping. This episode made me think. I was like, oh man, his motivations end up being like, oh, he's after like sex, and I mean he made that pretty clear last episode, but now he's found that one person he's latched on to. He kind of reminds me of Travis Touchdown from No More Heroes, like, cause that was like Travis's main motivation doing all he was like, oh, sex. Isn't it Sylvia? Isn't that her name? It's been a while, so I don't remember. I want to say it's Sylvia or something like that. But yeah, like Travis like majorly simps for her and willing to do everything just to get with her. So it kind of like seems like Makima and Denji kind of have a similar thing, and it's a thing of she probably reads Denji as, let's face it, the simp that he is, to the nth degree. And I think that's probably like a little bit of the effed up nature of their relationship, because he's probably like the protagonist that simps super hard for her. But yeah, once again, it's just like interesting protagonist with interesting motivation that, it's like, I get it. You like legitimately trying to bust a nut. Hell, you only have one left, so might as well make the most of it, right? Well, I forgot to talk about that last episode. He did recover his eye after fusing with Pochita and becoming Chainsaw Man. So he probably got back his kidney, his soul, and that nut. So he probably might be up to 2 testicles at this point in time. Either way, but like he's seeing the scary side of her, because she's like, oh, I need a pet who will say yes and wolf, but not no. And then he's like, oh, she's actually kind of scary. But then she offers him his jacket and her jacket, and he's like, oh, well, she actually is nice. And he's like, oh, I'm super in love. It's like, I mean, and there's layers to that. One, hey, he's not the type to say no, because the way he was raised and the way he's been for the past couple years working for the Yakuza, he's kind of the perfect person to kind of be in that position for her. Also, she's the first person that's ever treated him nicely. Once again, doesn't say he smells bad, wants to avoid him. And because of that, it's like, of course he's going to be in love. But, it's that kind of thing of when you've been through so much trauma, terrible stuff, and abuse, like, of course you're going to be like, you're going to latch on to the first person that treated you nicely. So it's like, it's understandable. So I thought that's such an interesting dynamic. Hell, even later on when he orders food and she like feeds it to him, and because she was like, oh, can you eat it on your own? He's like, yeah, and he was like, no, and she fed it to him. He's like, wolf, and it's just like, oh, Jesus, Denji. Oh man, that's once again wild protagonist in that capacity. But yeah, it seems like specifically using his powers drains him, because you are literally summoning chainsaws from your body. So he's like, it kind of makes me low on blood. So it does seem like he can just eat to recover. It doesn't seem like he has to. Well, I mean, because Pochita like ate stuff to regular food too, and it's capable of don't have to just eat blood. I wonder, can they survive off of like demon blood? Well, he was slashing through demons, so I don't know if he like necessarily consumed them or not. So, because he might have been slicing through them but not eating their blood, but maybe demons don't eat other demons. I mean, devils don't eat other devils. Maybe they do. Speaking of, last episode I was like, oh, this gives me Devil May Cry vibes. Sitting with it even more, even with the introduction of fiends, I'm like, oh, you know what else it gives me vibes of? In the same vein, which funny enough, considering there's a crossover there, is Shin Megami Tensei. Specifically Shin Megami Tensei, not Persona, because it's just like the darker element that is, I think Shin Megami Tensei just the franchise, but more specifically them. Like, I feel like even though Persona is like a subsection of it, because of like, I don't know, I feel like Persona isn't as dark. It can be dark, but it just doesn't, to me in my head, doesn't seem as dark or as grim as like Shin Megami Tensei is. Even though, once again, it's the same franchise, it's just a sub-franchise. It's a sub-series under the franchise. You get what I'm saying. But so, like I said, it just gives me more Shin Megami Tensei vibes. But yeah, the introduction of fiends. Fiends are when devils possess a dead human corpse. I don't know why I said that. That's redundant. A human corpse. But it's like, oh, and Denji's like, oh, am I a fiend? But it's like, no, just like she said last episode, it's like you can tell by their face. But it's like, I guess because only like when Denji activates his power with the chainsaw head, that's kind of a clear sign of it. But it's not the same. It seems different because he has most of his body's intact, but like his body changes in a way. I mean, once again, we only saw the one. Well, technically, we've seen two fiends this episode, but we'll get to that later. But so one looks not too dissimilar to him, but even then, like even being in his state, he still looks mainly human until he activates his power. Whereas every other fiend is like, no, I'm fiend status 100% of the time. So he is a very special case because even she's like in the history of everything, there hasn't really been a case like Denji. So I'm sure that's another reason why she's keeping him around, just kind of like, oh, he can be useful, but she also probably can, she has a good smell and sense of smell, probably just in both a literal sense and figurative sense. Literal in like, oh, I'm able to pick up devil stuff, but also figurative in the sense of I can smell through sincerity and people's desires, so I like know what he wants. And she probably knows that he wants her. Maybe she doesn't. She knows that she knows that Denji will do whatever for her, because later on when she assigns him a team, because like there are a whole bunch of devil hunters out there. She's like, in Tokyo alone there's like 1,000, including civilians. They're just civilians, which I guess like Denji himself was kind of like an unofficial, well, I don't know if they're all under the same umbrella working for the government, but like he was on off the books, like specifically devil hunter working for the Yakuza. So he wasn't of any official status, but this is more an official like, oh, you belong to public safety. They themselves kind of have a little bit more leniency and leeway than a lot of other places. Specifically, the group she has him join, what was it, like Special Division 4 or something like that, which is like led by Aki, was it Hayakawa? But Denji did not want to work with Aki because he thought he was going to be working with Makima. He's like, no, I want to be with Miss Makima like that, but it's like, no, it doesn't work out like that. And he kind of acts like a spoiled child when he kind of doesn't get his way. Like, this is what I want. Like, I want to work with Makima. But then she's like, right, you keep doing good work and then we'll eventually get to work together. And that's all the motivation he needs. So he's asking Aki all these questions like, oh, does she have a boyfriend? Even later on, is she a nice person? It's like, well, she hunts down devils and stuff like that. He's like, oh, so that does mean she's a nice person. He's like, of course. And it's like, well, because Aki at first he's kind of the Sasuke of this, especially because we know like a whole bunch of devils are killed his family, so he's out for revenge. He has no mercy for any devils; he'll put them all down, type of situation, which makes his work and living situation currently an interesting conundrum because him and Denji are living together. But either way, he tried to beat the piss out of Denji because he's like, right, everyone here has their own motivations, but you're here with such flimsy reasons of you want to be with Makima, so don't show up. And then Denji got up. I was like, oh, he's going to fight back, and he does. But he's like, I'm not above fighting dirty. Like, why do I care? Like, I'm not a clean cut by the rules book type of person. Straight laced is like, no, fuck that. Kicks him in the balls repeatedly over and over again. And he's like, yes, you're right. Makima is my goal. But the fact is, because he's also like, yeah, because I'm not living just for me anymore. Like, I used to kind of, like, I wouldn't care too much about my life, and even if I die, like, I accept the, responsibility, like, yeah, I might die during this work. He had accepted that prior to all of this anyway, but also he's like, no, I've got extra reason to live, because my life isn't just mine anymore. He's also living for Pochita, which she did say, like, Pochita isn't dead, that, he is, as long as, like, he's representing Denji's heart, he's kind of still alive. Which is interesting too. Once again, I'm about to do it. I'm going to do it. Trails of Cold Steel kind of reminds me of Rain Circumstances. As you find out later on, Rain Schwarzer's heart circumstances. Very interesting. You find out about it in the third game. You get more explanation on it. And it's still something Rain has. And I love that Denji tried to bring him back after like he passed out from the constant nut blows. And then it's like, yeah, he was attacked by a nut demon. And it's like, no, Denji's lying. And Makima's like, oh wow, glad to see you two are working together so well. So, yep, you're officially going to be working together. So, and he talks about like, oh yeah, I want to hug Miss Makima, and then Aki's like, what? It's like, well, no, hug her, get another hug from her, because Aki's in the same boat where it's like Makima saved him, and to an extent, she did the same thing for Denji as well, saved him from like his lonely existence. So like he, once again, he latched on to her. So uh, Aki's dealing with his roommate situation, the mess that Denji made, where he's eating the bread with like jam, and all these different jams, cinnamon, and it's just that he's kind of living it up, that dream, taking a bath, being good, almost passing out, falling asleep on the toilet, using up all the toilet paper. It's like he's living not such a shitty life anymore, and he's kind of enjoying it. So, but yeah, they get called on their first technical job together, and it's a fiend, and rather than using his powers, Denji kills him like pretty painlessly, and he's like, yeah, if I pull out my chainsaw, it would have kind of got messy. I didn't want that. I kind of felt bad for the person. But then Aki's like, are you going to really feel sympathy for any demon and stuff like that? And he's like, yeah, but if I could make a friend with a devil, I would, because I've never had any friends. And Aki's like, I'll remember that. But it's like, well, we know he did. He was friends and partners with Pochita. So it's like, but then it's like, then we find out the real reason. Oh, because he's trying to save the porn magazines. I was like, dude, what the fuck, dude? He's like, yeah, I want to keep these porn magazines safe because he's trying to, I guess, like learn everything he needs and can learn, about the maybe female body before he like makes his move. Because he's like, I want to get together with Makima, and then I want to know if like we get together, can we get together? So he's like, yeah, thanks for the magazines. They're in pretty good condition. That was his main motivation. So once again, you got to appreciate a protagonist who knows what he wants. And at first he talks about it. He's like, right, like I'm living the life I wanted and dreamed of, like I told Pochita I would. But the question then becomes like, why do I still feel like something's missing? It's like a 10 out of 10 life, but he still feels like it's not a perfect score. And he thinks about what Aki wants. And he's like, oh, Makima must have something that she wants, that more than anything. It's like, oh yeah, these officers who are putting their life on the line, the other hunters out there putting their life on the line every day. Everyone has their motivation. So like, what else is motivating me? And for him, it's like, oh, I want to touch boobs. And that's going to be the next step for him. And it's like, that's going to be his goal moving forward. So, but then he meets Power, which they say it in the intro, like when they show her like in that like part of the intro where she's like wearing a bikini. I did not realize that was actually her name. That's so fascinating. But she's a fiend herself. So, but for whatever reason, she's willing to work with them. And I guess it's like, it seemed like Power already had a reputation for killing other devils. I brought that up earlier, being like, oh, are there any devils that feed on devils? I don't know if that was necessarily what Power did, or whether Power is just like, oh, I'm the archetype of, I just want to fight powerful enemies and get stronger and be the strongest. So, but yeah, like Denji was kind of reluctant at first, but then he saw Power's boobs moving and was like, okay, let's partner up. It's like, once again, motivations on lock. But apparently, Power scares off a lot of devils, so it's like, yeah, we're not really finding any like we should. And Power's like, oh, it must be because of my scent. I was pretty scary before I became a fiend, so most devils kind of avoided me. And now Denji thinks Aki's trying to sabotage him. It's like, oh, that bastard's trying to make me look bad, because it's like, if they don't prove results, because it's like, this is an experimental group, and it's like all eyes are going to be on you, and any like outside powerful people are going to look for any excuse to shut this down. And the moment you prove not to be useful, both Power and Denji will be disposed of. So, but yeah, we do get a little taste of what Power can do at the end of the episode, as she jumps down a building, summons blood, and turns it into a hammer. So it's like, interesting. So she's a bloodbender. I'm curious to see how far that can go, because the example I was about to think of, it's like, well, bloodbending from Avatar: The Last Airbender, there's Jin V, the boy spinoff. But then I was also like, oh, wasn't there something else kind of anime-esque related that kind of dealt with that? And I was like, oh, I guess like the closest, like Rai from Noblesse kind of has a similar circumstance, like with blood and stuff and weaponizing it like that. So that's kind of neat getting that, and she's just like laughing maniacally as she killed the thing. She's like, look at me. This kill is mine. So yeah, Dingy's, he's like, yeah, luckily she's crazy, but her hotness kind of balances out the crazy. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot people would do, like, oh, for someone that's hot, and it's like, you will kind of ignore a lot of red flags just for that purpose. And once again, Dingy's got his mind on like, oh, how do I go about touching her boobs? It's like, the thing is, you could probably ask straight up, like, and Power probably wouldn't. I'm just getting a feeling like Power wouldn't think too much of that. Who knows? We'll have to wait to see. But I'm once again still digging the series. I'm excited to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.